Hey guys, thank you so much and welcome to the Game Your Future podcast. I'm Daniel and I am joined by our special guest today, James Baillie. James is a game developer, game writer, and historian. And as historian, I think is really cool that he focuses on how tech and games are affecting our understanding of history. Very cool. So thank you so much and welcome, James. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about the historian part, especially. So what does it mean as far as the tech in games and how it affects history? What all does that mean, and how are you shaping that?
Sure. So my original background is I'm sort of trained as a historian, particularly as a medievalist. But the thing that interests me with games is that the way that games structure their mechanics and the underlying systems that you know you play with as a gamer, um, they often kind of frame particular ideas about the kind of game world we're inhabiting. Whether that might be, in some worlds, for example, combat is a very like bloody, slow slugfest of an affair. In some, it's quick, it's dangerous. You don't want to go into combat unless you have to. And those sort of things reflect ideas about the kind of world we're inhabiting. Um, and, and those can express basically arguments of all kinds, but they can absolutely, therefore, give you ideas about history and historical experiences, both in games that are officially claiming to be historically accurate and in games where people want that kind of historical feel. I mean, nobody thinks that The Witcher is a historically accurate game, I hope, but but it's absolutely riffing on a lot of what people think of and feel about the past in the way that it's put together. People can identify that's medieval, even if they don't think that it's, an accurate representation in every respect.
Right. When you add on the monsters and the magic, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, then it kind of breaks a little reality. So I guess the question is, so of the games, so you said you focus kind of on a medieval kind
Yeah,
of time.
particularly. Yeah.
So out of curiosity, then, are there specific games, in that medieval genre, medieval time, that you would say are more accurate than others, and what are the ones that are just like absolutely not? This is just, silly arcade, whatever.
So in some ways, I try not to just do it as a like accuracy ranking
Hmm.
because I think that often what's most interesting to me is not just what percentage of stuff did you get accurate, because accuracy in one thing doesn't like it's not just one metric, right? So for example, you have a game like Kingdom Come Deliverance, and KCD is well known for doing tons of historical research, and you know, if you want to know what a sword in late medieval Czechia looked like, KCD is great. But there are aspects of the history that they absolutely play fast and loose with, particularly the kind of social history, the way people interact with things like religion and some of that kind of social stuff, because they have other ideas for the narrative they want to write. Um, but those two things don't balance out. It doesn't. You can't make up for a loss of the social accuracy just by having a better sword or a better house or a better, visual accuracy.
Yeah.
So a lot of what I think about is often what have you pulled out of the Middle Ages and what have you left behind? And I think that's really interesting, both from the perspective of, okay, so why are you making those choices? What's this sorting process? But also seeing maybe what we haven't taken out of the past for games and therefore what we could use. There's a whole bunch of stuff in history that just hasn't made its way into modern gaming. And I think there's some really interesting stuff that we're kind of still sleeping on a bit. So yeah, but that also means that there are some games that are much more fantastical, but actually do have some really interesting ideas about history in them that maybe some of the really historical games don't, because a lot of those like very accurate games often focus on this very grounded, much more gritty kind of medieval, when actually, I mean, medieval people did have fun. This wasn't
Yeah.
just a period where everybody was um, hitting each other with swords, looking very sad all the time. There's a lot of whimsy and a lot of silliness in the medieval stuff that survived to us, and there are some fancy games that actually play with that in interesting ways. And I think that's that's also a valid way of using history in games, and one that I think is useful for how we think about the past and the present.
And that's just thinking about that out loud is like, oh yeah, people have been around for thousands of years. Everybody, like the medieval time is like it wasn't just all depressing all the time. Like people
Oh
were
yeah,
able to, yeah, people were able to have fun and actually do things, and that's, I mean, that's where we have like the whole the bards from all sorts of games of
absolutely.
D&D,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's like
yeah,
it's all
yeah,
like hanging out in the tavern, having fun, dancing, listening to music, right? So that's
yeah,
been
yeah.
around.
And there's a lot more color in the medieval world because people often again think that it's going to be this very gray and brown kind of world, but
Yep.
then a lot of these people are actually out in like nature and the natural world way more than the average modern person. So they're seeing color just from the perspective of like birds and skies and sunsets, and their sunsets were as colorful as ours are.
Yeah,
and
right.
and their well and their night skies were often much more colorful because
That's
so
true.
much of what we see at night is kind of blotted out by light pollution.
Yes.
So if you like go way out into the Sahara Desert, you get a much more brilliant set of night sky colors. But that was normal for everybody before like the 18th century.
Right, and it's fascinating to think about because yeah, very few people are able to experience that now. I got at
Mm,
least a glimpse of it too, which I was in just visiting like vacation a remote part of Thailand, and we
mm.
went up like on a mountaintop, and that was when I felt like I saw the stars for the first time because it was like, holy crap, they feel like they're in your face, and I was
Yeah,
like this is not what I thought when I looked up at the night sky and you're like, oh yeah, there's a few stars or whatever. It's like, no, it's light pollution completely changes it. So yeah, so I definitely encourage anyone that can go to these like remote places where there's like little or no light pollution to see the night sky. It is a different experience. Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, it's so cool. So as far as the history and how I guess the tech side of things too. I wanted to ask you at least a little bit on
Yeah.
that. So like, yeah, because I see like games in medieval, so like medieval games. What is it about the tech side that you think is interesting for history?
Yeah, so part of my work is essentially developing tech solutions for historians. And a lot of the what I'm thinking about and the way that kind of applies between games and tech and history is thinking about the ways that we structure information. Essentially, one of the biggest parts of the kind of computer revolution that people kind of now take for granted because it's so embedded everywhere is just that people are now turned into data, and there's lots of lines on spreadsheets with your details on them somewhere. And we just kind of assume that, therefore we put everything into categories and boxes in ways that were impossible for most people in the past.
Yeah.
Um, so, and particularly with just sortable databases, that's not a thing before the 1990s. And that's an enormous change to every part of how we deal with information. But that means that there's a whole bunch of stuff that we almost still haven't really thought about because the way that we do data is almost all based out of the sciences. But, the sciences kind of got there first. They developed a lot of really useful ways to deal with information. But some of the information we have as historians, or indeed in lots of other walks of life, doesn't fit that scientific model very well. And that's a large part of my work, is looking at things like, well, a lot of scientific data, you have one assumption that you can basically always make, which is somebody got this via an experiment or via some observation, and therefore you can basically trust the information. Like that's a root part of almost all of science. And yeah, okay, sometimes somebody will falsify some data and there's a scandal, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
Um, in history, or indeed in like politics or law or lots of other parts of life, you cannot trust that at all. A lot of this information that we're getting from a medieval chronicler, this is something that somebody heard from somebody else who heard it from somebody else, and it happened two generations before that, and they heard it from their grandfather, and then somebody writes it down, and so no, you can't like rely on the information the same way.
Mm.
So that sense of how information and truth line up is a very major part of what I have to think about in my work is, yeah, are there ways we can structure data that help us think about what is true or what is not true, or at least avoid us having to pin things down when we're not sure. There's a lot of arguments around some things in like the European Middle Ages where there'll be some historical figure and one region is like, oh, he was definitely one of us, and another group of people like, oh no, definitely our guy. And so often the truth is actually, either we don't know or it's fuzzy or
Yeah.
it's both. There were
Or it's
absolutely people had multiple identities in the past. Just, there can abs in the same way that you could have somebody who has like dual citizenship today. There were absolutely people in the past who had like parents from different ethnic groups or
mm.
were from one ethnic group but had adopted somebody else's religion, and all of that kind of stuff adds complexity that often gets easily washed away and more easily washed away in tech context where you're trying to, pin it down and put it into a category.
And that's really
Um,
interesting as far as like the aliases or the multiple identities, right? Because that's
yeah.
and I wonder, yeah, and maybe you know more than me, but like how much the word I'm sure didn't exist probably, but like, the thought of identity theft, right, in this day and age
Oh yeah.
versus what it was back in medieval times, where it's like, oh yeah, you can just say that you're somebody else, and you're like, there's no
Oh
database
yeah.
to go look up, right?
I mean, we do actually have I think there is particularly one quite famous surviving French legal case from the late Middle Ages of identity theft. Like
Oh
this is
wow.
something that really does go back that
So,
far. Um, so yeah, no, it was definitely a problem there, and yeah, potentially more of a problem than it is today in all sorts of ways. And you get this a lot in some cases with royal families as well, because if you are a senior nobleman and you want to be running the country, and you think that the king is terrible, but you're not a member of the royal family, so you can't take the throne yourself necessarily. So, one of the solutions some of these guys come up with is they just grab some random scrub and be like, yeah, by the way, you were secretly the bastard child of some other king and definitely an heir to the throne.
definitely an heir to the
And
throne.
that kind of stuff. I mean, there's one patch in there are some patches in Byzantine histories where you have like three or four guys pretending to be the same person at once level of
Wow.
nonsense. So yeah,
No,
that kind of like pretenders to the throne thing is very much
that's yeah, and there
happened
you go.
several
That's where
times.
that phrase comes from, right? And I guess there was no DNA testing back then too, so it's
And
not like you
no,
could
no, there very much was not.
definitely not. Oh, too funny. So okay, so I also wanted to talk about a little bit on your personal journey too, with especially the gaming, right? So we talked
Yeah,
about, kind of how gaming influences on the history side and how, that's influence on like game design, yeah, especially Kingdom Come Deliverance like that. But how about yourself, James? What kind of games do you like? Where did you start? You know, how much of a gamer are you?
yeah. I game probably more than is great for my productivity sometimes, but it is definitely something I do.
Okay.
Yeah, so I do a range of gaming. I would say I tend to play strategy and role-playing games. Sometimes I play things a bit more in the like survival or crafting type mold. I tend to play less things in the survival crafting type mold because they are very big rabbit holes for me to go down. Um, I'm
Yeah.
absolutely I think that there's just a little like creative bit of my brain where, if you give me here is an open space and here are some like building elements, then I will be there for a while.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, but I love kind of classic RPGs. I'm very much a fan of your kind of Baldur's Gate 3, Witcher 3, and also some of the older stuff. I will also happily play the original Baldur's Gates or Dragon Age Origins, that kind of side of things. And but I started more with strategy though. So I think the first proper game I ever really owned was Civilization 2.
Ah,
Um,
yep.
and I did a lot of playing classic Rome Total War back in the day. Um,
Okay.
one of my kind of, in a sense, one of my first forays into game design was I did a lot of like making game mods for the 2005 Rome Total War.
Ah,
Um,
okay. So
um,
that's where you say you would probably you got your kind of feet wet, if you will, for game design was doing mods,
yeah,
right? Yep.
yeah. yeah. For that and for the original Mountain Blade, I did quite a bit of modding.
I did. Yeah, I played the crap out of some Mountain Blade. I
Yeah,
remember that one too. Yeah. Oh, too much fun. So the starting with the mods into game design. So tell us a little bit about the
yeah,
game design side of things. So you said you're a game writer or game developer, along with
yeah,
being a historian, which is really cool. So tell us about your game and kind of your process.
yeah. Absolutely. So I've been building small games for quite a number of years now. I mean, I was kind of picking this up originally when I was still in high school. I kind of taught myself Python essentially to make little text adventures and that kind of stuff. Did a couple of small text adventure projects which are floating around online. There's a survival text adventure based in the medieval Fenland where you spend your time doing eel fishing. And I did a little Doctor Who fan game a few years ago. More recently, the kind of bigger game I did is called The Exile Princes. It's a very old school turn-based role-playing game. It's very procedurally generated. Every time you start a new game, you get a new map, new towns, new characters. Um, and so a lot of it was me playing around with ideas about how do we procedurally make narratives? How do I make something that is built from parts, but also creates stories that can feel different to each other? And that was the interest for me. Um, so yeah, and very much I'm self-taught on the programming. Please never show my code to a properly trained programmer. They will, I mean, the code all works, but programmers who have a more formal training sometimes go, "Why did you do it that way?" um, um, and yeah, I'm much less a graphics guy. For the graphics for this game, I actually went through actual medieval manuscripts and just pulled out little bits of the images to like turn into tile art for it.
Oh, there you
Um,
go. Yeah.
so yeah, that was a fun part of the process. Um, and yeah, it's quite an open-ended game. A couple of people have described it as a Mountain Blade, like not in the sense that there's any of that like real-time combat, but in the sense that you kind of start more or less on your own with a small band of followers, and then you can kind of build up, and then in the late game you're kind of taking over cities, and there's a kind of political aspect to it.
Well, that's awesome because
Um,
yeah, I definitely love Mountain Blade for that, where you get to start with your little just like your one guy and you get a bunch of
yeah,
followers and you can eventually like I always like to kind of break from my whatever my the lord I was serving and be like I'm making my own
yes,
country, right? That was
yeah,
always the best.
absolutely. And yeah, so this is a game that has that kind of character arc, I guess. And yeah, there's companion characters. It's the general setting is a slightly more kind of whimsical medieval fantasy. So I precisely in some ways because I was going with that medieval manuscript tradition stuff where there's all this really rich set of like margin doodles of weird creatures and so on, and I wanted to kind of reflect that kind of vibe in the game properly. Um, and yeah, in terms of process, it's very much been that was a very slow process in many ways, in that it was something I was doing alongside, writing my doctorate and so on. So I was kind of taking, a weekend every couple of months, and then I would do a 2-day blitz of programming,
Mhm.
and then it would have to be left for another couple of months. But I'm definitely somebody who can do that kind of slow burn on projects, and I often do. Which yeah, it's a way that works for me, certainly. I think it frustrates some people with game development when they want to jump to having a playable game very quickly. But
Right.
yeah, I definitely started with a more intensive run till the point where I got something that did have some very minimal playability to it, and then it was just, every once in a while you stack another feature in there, you put another character in there, etc., etc., and
Okay,
builds up and
because
gets
yeah,
there
that's what I was
eventually.
going to ask about the game development process, right? As far as because you don't want to get burned out, of course,
Absolutely,
trying to
yeah.
go too hard too fast. But was there specific? So it sounds like there was at least one big milestone, but as were there multiple milestones along the way to like kind of keep you engaged? As far as like I just need something that the minimum playability, like you said, is like I get
Yeah.
to move a thing on a screen, right?
Yeah, minimum playability happened pretty early in the process. Partly because I was kind of reshaping some bits of code that I already had from a previous game. So in I mentioned I did a little Doctor Who fan game a while ago, and in that there is a little subsection of the game where you can like program a little mining robot that moves around the screen. Um,
Uh,
and I took that, you can move a thing around the screen block of code, and that is what then underpins the like map function in the next game. So there's definitely an extent to which part of it's just been building up over the years from. But I sometimes teach people to make very small text-only games. I sometimes do that as a classroom practice,
uh,
and I think with Python you can get somebody to put together something where like they've got something that starts feeling like a text adventure in 90 minutes. It's a something that you can teach somebody very quickly. Um, and then yes, then it may be like 10 years of different games and little iterations, and it does build up over time. But yeah, it's good, I think, to get to a playable state quickly, and it's good to get to something that you want to play and you want to look at. I mean, I do enjoy playing my own game. Um, and for me,
important.
particularly as somebody who isn't trying to do this as my like primary commercial outlet, that's super important. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And so I think that's huge for anyone trying to develop like their own game, right? Is to say like what's minimum playability because like that
yeah,
to me that shows I think a couple of things. Like you have that sense of accomplishment. First off, it's
yeah,
like I have a thing, and it's also something socially, right? If you're someone that wants
yes,
to kind of share the process to be like, oh, this is what I'm working on.
absolutely.
It's like, well, now I have something to show, right? And
Yeah,
that's I think huge. And that just kind of helps reinforce it because somebody can give that on the feedback and be like, oh, that's really cool, really interesting. It can move around. And then you get that sense of satisfaction, reflected from somebody else too. Um, and then how do, I guess, the getting to something that you want to play, awesome. Uh, I think a lot of people might struggle. And kind of what would your advice be as far as like what you're saying, the slow burn? Because like you said, probably a lot of people
yeah.
hate that. Like, oh, it's just taking too long. What would you say to those kind of people as far as like kind of staying engaged for the long haul?
Yeah. I think for me, the way it works is that I need to have, and partly I just tend to have multiple projects for different things running at the same time. Part, but for me, the reason that's good and the reason game development works well for me is that it means that I'm not burning out on a specific thing. Um, So, you know, if there is a week when my brain is just not in the right space to do programming, I can work on some art assets or some writing.
Mm.
And I mean, I'm lucky in some ways in that I do have like I can spread over most of those things. But I think that is really helpful is um when you have a bunch of different tasks like that, being able to say, okay, no, this is just not the right time for this. I'm not going to be productive when I do this. Let's try and do something else that's still going to contribute in some ways. So that's helpful. And I think the other thing is just um yeah, it's just not kind of pressuring yourself too much. I think too many people who get into game development or want to get into game development kind of do want to jump to the end very quickly, the and it's totally understandable why people want to, have their envisioned game in front of them. But
Yeah.
in a sense, if you want to do game development, you need to enjoy the process to some extent. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that there's an extent to which, if what you really want is to play your ideal game, then you kind of need to think about what are your options for doing that? Because game development is one of them, but also engaging with developers, talking to developers, supporting developers can also be really huge. And I've seen some people who've tried to jump into game development where actually, in some ways, I think they would have been better off just kind of getting involved in those communities first, talking to people, seeing what's out there that's kind of in their direction and where they can contribute to that.
Mm,
rather than trying to do absolutely everything all at once and it becomes an avalanche and it crushes them and they go, oh, this wasn't for me at all. Um,
right.
but yeah, I think other people are a huge part of particularly Indian hobbyist game development. And almost especially if you're a solo developer, because you then have to go out of your way to do the people stuff. But it's a
Right.
hugely rewarding part of it, and it's one of the things that really always keeps you going, I think. It's
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the kind of I'll say it like one of the counterintuitive things, right? For a solo developer, right? And for entrepreneurship, like the solopreneur, that everybody's like, oh, well, you're solo, you go it alone. And it's like, actually, no. And what I think kind of breaks people's minds too, where it's
yeah,
like, oh yeah, it's like I'm doing this myself. It's like, yes, you have the sole ownership of it, but you're absolutely talking to other people, right? No, nobody
yeah,
does this alone, right? And like you said, it's just simply just talking in either communities or just like support from people, and sometimes it's just close friends. It's just like when you bounce ideas off people, when you talk about things, like it really helps. And so the idea of this solo developer just like locked in a room, just coding for days and weeks, months straight, it's like that's not realistic. And
yeah,
if you try it, then like you'll burn out, right? Because there's
absolutely.
no way.
And in my case, yeah, and in my case, there were several like key sources of that kind of stuff. Um, I mean, I've had good connections with other game developers locally, where I'm currently based in Austria, but also there's been a web forum community that I've been active in for a lot of years, which has some really great developers around it who I was able to kind of share experiences and opinions and ideas with. There've been lots of other developers. I mean, in some cases, I've also then gone on to do bits of freelance work with one or two other developers that I kind of met along the way. Um, so yeah, I think making those connections has been enormously valuable throughout this. I also run an annual kind of workshop event for specifically putting historians and game developers in touch with one another. Um, and that's again been a very valuable source of being able to bounce ideas off people and just, yeah, build the network that's going to, I mean, as much as anything keep you going. Some people I think of networking just as oh, it's like a resource extraction thing almost. Who do I need for the specific task?
Yeah,
But
that's it.
it's got to be much more deep than that, I think. You've got to have the people who you can bounce the ideas around with, or just, just be supportive to each other. That's an enormous part of it.
I completely agree. That's I've always been wary of like the networking events that truly are just kind of that surface level. Like some of those you can tell like from the outside. It's like, all right, you're just exchanging business cards and then that's it. Like, where we'll pretend like we'll do
Yeah, yeah,
something. It's like what you're saying, like, actually like coming around, I think a theme, right? Like, so I love that, like have, history plus gaming. So it's like, that there's going to be those kind of people there.
yeah,
And those are the people that you're more willing to, and want to connect with. And so you're going to form those kind of, I'll call them, sturdier, stronger bonds with those kind of people, as opposed to just like, hey, just go down to your local chamber of commerce. We're going to do a networking event. And you're like, for who? For
yeah,
what?
yeah,
Like, so I love that connection piece. And you're absolutely right. Just networking with people, not for the resource extraction element. And for those
mm,
listening and watching, I think it's like when you do those networking events, it's really you're put in the room to really try to have genuine connections with people to see like who can you help and who can help you, but really trying to understand and come from that place of like, how do I serve and help people? And you'll have that reciprocity back as opposed to just like, how can I get the most out of this event? Like, that's not what you're there for.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
so I love like your kind of idea for the event where you actually get people that you want to be in the room that you will want to talk with and connect with, right? Um, and I will say, like, as we wind down this particular episode for this podcast, I I gotta ask, like, maybe where can people find you, and where can people find out more about this event? Because I think there's definitely people that have that love for history, game development, game design that would love to either come to your event or learn more about you, James. Where can we find you?
Absolutely. So my own social media, you can certainly find me on Bluesky and on the kind of Mastodon network. In both cases, that's at Jubil Barker. Can I give you kind of a written
Absolutely. Yeah,
version for
we'll
some
have all
show
the links
notes?
for you guys down in the
Yeah,
description too.
yeah. Yeah, great. Also I mean, the web forum I mentioned as a kind of community that I got a lot of support from while doing my own game design is at exilion.co.uk. That's also got a kind of article section with a bunch of interesting kind of world building and game design articles. And it also is one of the kind of co-hosts for this workshop series. So it's co-hosted between that kind of forum community and the Academy of Sciences here in Vienna. So the yeah, academic and game dev sides of it. So yeah, and again, I can absolutely give you the link for that.
Perfect.
One more event that I think also might be of interest to people is that there is a much more publicly accessible Middle Ages in Modern Games kind of digital conference, which is an annual event and it's done as essentially a short blog post format. So that's all very available for anyone to read. And yeah, I can absolutely pass you a link to that as well for anyone who's
Perfect.
interested.
Yeah, we'll have, yeah, definitely, absolutely. Let me have the links for those, and we'll have all those in the description in the show notes for people to check out. So, gosh, thank you so much for this, James. It's been truly fun, truly
Thank
fantastic.
you.
And I do have one additional question before we go, and it is a question I ask everyone on the show, which is, of course, what is your favorite video game?
And probably a lot of people make the face that I just made, which is
Yep.
the how
Oh, we
do I
love it here.
decide that? um, I
Search
mean,
the
there are obviously too many to name. Um, I will just say at the moment, like right at the time of writing, I'm actually really enjoying the Lord of the Rings Return to Moria game. I mean, I mentioned earlier that survival crafting games are a big hole for me, and I'm currently the dwarf digging the big hole, and it's
currently
very
in one right now.
enjoyable. Yeah, it's got a lot of creativity in the kind of building and crafting side of it, but also, I mean, as a Tolkien fan. I think they get some of the like themes and feel of Tolkien stuff
Hmm.
really well compared to a lot of games. There's just that sense of like singing and eating and like honoring the dead and things like that being like worked into the gameplay in ways that I really like. So yeah,
Oh, that's
that,
cool. I think you're the first one that
that's my
said that
current
one.
enjoyment. Um,
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. So, definitely a good one. So, gosh, thank you so much, James. This has been fantastic. So, guys, definitely check out all the different events that James is a part of. Connect with him on social. If you're into game development or history, right? Especially this medieval era. I love it.
yeah.
I love me some Mountain Blade, tell you that. Gosh. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And everybody out there, remember, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.